My wife and I went to Egypt to visit, and we were in Israel for 10 days, and we caught our flight from Israel to Egypt. I will never forget my experience. We took off from Tel Aviv, and before I could fix my seatbelt, the announcement came over the PA system. Please prepare for landing. I became confused. We just took off, and we were landing. Now, I thought that Egypt was far away from Israel, and so I became confused. I said to the flight attendant, I said, excuse me, ma'am, is there a problem? She said, why? I said, why are we landing? She said, we are about to enter Cairo, Egypt. I said, but we just took off from Israel. She said, yes, sir. I said, but we didn't fly. She said, I know. I said, we're landing. She said, yes, we're landing. I said, wait a minute. It's only been 20 minutes. She says, yes. I said, wait a minute, lady. I was in Israel. That's Canaan, the promised land. And in 20 minutes, I'm in Egypt. She said, yes. I became confused. I started calculating. Let's see. 40 years. Why would it take 40 years to make a 20-minute journey? Interesting question. When we arrived in Egypt, we went to the hotel, put our bags down. Our guide came later that day to take us to see the pyramids and go to El-Aqsa and all the places of Egypt to see all the pharaohs, the history and everything. And we went to the pyramids and everything, and it's beautiful. And we felt like we entered the Old Testament, because that's where the Old Testament, really, most of it took place. And I said to my guide, when we were driving, I said, sir, how far away are we from Israel? He said, depends on how you get there. I said, okay, if I drove in a car, how long would it take? He said, it'll take about 7 hours. I said, what if I walk from Egypt to Israel? He said, it'll take 40 days. I said, what about the aircraft? He said, 20 minutes. I began to calculate. I said, wait a minute. If I drove in a car on a bus, it's 7 hours. If I walked, it's 40 days. If I flew, it's 20 minutes. I went back to my hotel room, confused. I picked up my Bible, because I had to go and find out what happened. And the Bible says, and they left Egypt, headed toward the promised land. But God did not take them directly there. I'm quoting the Bible. Because they were afraid in their minds. So he led them the long way around to get Egypt out of their minds. Now here's my mystery. This is Egypt. This is the promised land. And it's only 40 days walk. Why would it take 40 years? And I was confused. That means he kept them going around in circles for 40 years. Do you know why? Because they kept telling Moses, we want to go back. At least we knew where onions came from. We knew where garlic. There were pots of food in Egypt. Let's go back to the British way. It's too hard to run your own country. It's too difficult to take responsibility for your own future. Take us back to a place where other people ran our lives. We didn't have to think. Take us back where they provided peanut butter and cheese. And God says, none of you will enter the promised land, because you don't want to get rid of the Egypt thinking. So he led them for 30 years. Do you know why? Because 40 years is a generation. That means he kept them going in circles until he got what they were carrying. They were carrying the next generation. Joshua was not born in Egypt. He was born in the wilderness. Caleb was not born in Egypt. He was born in the wilderness. There are some people in this room who cannot make it to the promised land of the new Papua New Guinea. Why? They still want to go back. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the one right behind you. And this is why the young generation is the hope of Papua New Guinea. And I say to the older members of this great country, ask God to change your mind. Ask him to deliver you from the scent of oppression. Ask him to give you a miracle, not in your body, but in your mind, because their mind kept them out of the promised land. It's amazing. God healed their body, but never took them to the promised land. He fed them food, but never took them to the promised land. He kept their clothes for 40 years, but never took them to the promised land. In other words, God will preserve you until he gets what you want from you, and then he'll kill you. If you don't want to change your mentality, he'll bury you in the desert. Moses never made it. Not even Moses made it.